Over the course of the last month, I've been using the X-T5 as my main camera for my street photography. These are my first impressions of the Fujifilm X-T5. For a little while, I was starting to feel as if Fujifilm and their new cameras were going too far down the hybrid camera rabbit hole, not fully committing to a design for photography or a design for video. It resulted in camera designs that felt incomplete or sometimes awkward. That said, as a photographer and video creator myself, the Fujifilm X-T5 might be the answer for my photography and video making needs. Unsurprisingly, my first impressions of this camera is how different it feels in the hand compared to my X-E4. Now, there's nothing new about this grip on the X-T5, but coming from an X-E4, which theoretically has no ergonomics whatsoever, this grip in the front and in the back for your thumb, it certainly makes a difference if you're going to carry your camera in your hand more than half the day. Supposedly, the T5 is lighter and smaller than the T4. Can you tell? I really don't know. But the point is, it's still a very light camera. I pretended to use the X-T5 like it was a Ricoh GR, used it one-handed, and I was honestly surprised how comfortable it was to actually hold and shoot the camera in that way. I like to use the Fujifilm f2 lenses like this 23mm, 35mm, and 50mm. I think these are the perfect lenses, both in size and image quality, for a T5 camera like this. Now, this might be a hot take, but I think if you're doing street photography and travel, you're doing yourself a disservice by using the bigger, faster Fujifilm lenses. I just don't think they're all that worth it over a much smaller, lighter camera setup. A huge shout out to Woltencraft for sending me their beautiful leather straps. I'll have this one linked in the description. With the X-T5, it's the traditional SLR design, so your face is sort of enclosed into the back of the camera. If anything, it made me realize how much I actually prefer the offset placement of the viewfinder on my X-E4. With that offset viewfinder, you're able to see a lot more of what's around you when you're looking through the viewfinder. It's a small thing, but it's something I noticed going from one camera to the other. Also, this is a little bit of a rant, but I don't know why we don't see many upgrades to the EVF, because you spend so much of your time looking through the viewfinder, right? You'd think camera companies, and this isn't just Fujifilm, this is Sony and even Leica, they seem to think that 3.69 million dots is just like the standard now, when in reality, a much brighter, higher quality EVF makes a world of difference. So I don't know, I feel like they could have upgraded the EVF, which they didn't. When it comes to the button layout of the X-T5, you've got pretty much everything you'd expect out of a traditional XT camera. You got the shutter speed dial, exposure compensation dial, and ISO dial. There's locks for both the shutter speed dial and the ISO dial, but no lock for the exposure compensation dial, which I kind of wish was there. I think that would have been a nice update. When it comes to customizable function buttons, you've got a total of 11 physical buttons that can be programmed, and that doesn't include the touchscreen function buttons either, which I still have no desire to use. No one asked for a touchscreen on a camera. I must say, the buttons themselves, they're a lot more substantial than what I had on my X-E4. And that might not sound like a big deal, but When you use a camera all day, you notice those small differences, and just having a more tactile feeling back button for my autofocus, for example, it's a lot nicer. Shortly after this video goes live, I'll be releasing another video that goes through how I've set up this camera for street photography, so be on the lookout for that one. You might be curious whether or not the autofocus is any better on the X-T5, and I'm just gonna assume that it is, but I can't really tell. Honestly, I'd be lying to you if I knew that the autofocus, or could tell that the autofocus was faster than my X-T4, for example. There is an upgraded processor in this camera, and in that aspect, it does feel like a faster camera. Just, turning it on, going through the menus, the playback, it does feel faster, and there's not a lot of hiccups happening. Sometimes with my X-T4, if I turn the camera off and quickly turn it on again, sometimes it never turns on. I just get like a black screen. So yeah, nothing like that so far on my X-T5. I want to take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. As a street photographer, often I'll get stopped on the street by someone asking what I'm doing. And it's usually just out of interest. Rather than just pulling up my Instagram page to show someone my work, I like to bring up my website, which I've built through Squarespace. Using the shortcuts feature of my iPhone, I can quickly bring up a dedicated page to show some of my favorite images. I even have a QR code here so they can scan it and bring it up on their own phone, because you never know. They might be so interested that they want to work with me, and they could end up being a potential client. With Squarespace's easy-to-use templates, photographers of any level of expertise can start to build their professional-looking website. So any of you watching this video right now and you're interested in getting started, you can visit squarespace.com/Faisal to start a free trial, and then when you're ready to take the next step, you can use the code Faisal to get 10% off your first purchase. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. The X-T5 has Fujifilm's 5th generation 40 megapixel X-Trans CMOS sensor with a 7-stop in-body stabilization system. That's a huge leap in image quality coming from the X-T4, and it makes the X-T5 the smallest and lightest camera that Fujifilm has ever made with that high of a resolution. Alright, you got all that? Now, with all that said, I think we're at a point where digital cameras and improvements to, sensor resolution, we're far past the point of what can be considered good image quality. The image quality that I was getting from my X-T4 was more than enough for what I needed. So this new sensor isn't really the reason I would upgrade to an X-T5. Unless you do a lot of extensive cropping in your images, you probably won't see much of a difference in that image quality. That's just my honest opinion on new digital cameras these days. Now, for the most part, the X-T5's design is mostly unchanged. However, they did switch the tilt screen to be similar to what the X-T3 had. Doing away with the flip-out screen that you mostly see in hybrid photo-video cameras and opting for that flip-up screen really shows Fujifilm's redirection with the X-T series, bringing it back to being a photography-focused camera. When it comes to street photography, I much prefer this flip-up design because, it's a lot less cumbersome, it's a lower profile, and if you shoot vertically like I do a lot of the times, it's just a lot nicer to use in practice. One of my pet peeves with the X-T4 is its awkward LCD flip-up screen. It was one of those questionable design choices that kind of showed Fujifilm probably stepped too far down the road of a hybrid camera. It might sound weird, but this screen update is one of the reasons I would actually upgrade to an X-T5 over my X-E4. You know, this design, it's a lot more functional and practical for how I shoot. Now you might ask, why not just get an X-T3? It has the same overall design and it has that same LCD flip-up screen. But the X-T5 also has a lot of high quality internal specs for video. As a photographer first, but someone who also has a YouTube channel, I find myself constantly going between taking photos and filming on the streets, especially so when I'm traveling. Having a camera that can easily transition between street photography and filmmaking, that's theoretically the perfect camera for what I need. Over the last few years of having this YouTube channel, I'd use my Sony as a separate video camera. For whatever reason, the photography experience of a Sony camera just doesn't do it for me. I much prefer using a Fujifilm camera for street photography, and I also even prefer the image quality and color rendering of Fujifilm cameras. So, you know, I'd just bring two cameras with me. With Fujifilm's recent video upgrades to its image quality, I'm really pleased with where Fujifilm has gone in terms of video, and it's pretty comparable to what I have on my Sony. When it comes to traveling, I think I can now finally leave my Sony behind and just bring an X-T5 with me. That way I have a complete all-in-one camera for photography and video. Now, it's not all perfect with the X-T5. I still wish there was a way to program the buttons, the physical buttons of the camera, to be completely separate from photography and video. My Sony can do it. I don't know why Fujifilm wouldn't be able to do it as well. Now, do I see myself switching to the X-T5 from the X-E4 as my primary camera? And the answer to that is yes, because it essentially solves my two-camera dilemma for photography and video. The X-T5 is just the ideal hybrid for me in the sense that it's externally designed to be a pure photography camera, but also has the internals of a great video camera. And being able to seamlessly go between both of those modes is a huge plus. You know, if I didn't care about video at all, I probably wouldn't actually upgrade to an X-T5. Any of the older Fujifilm cameras are just as good as these newer ones coming out. Higher image quality, faster autofocus, those things are a little bit overrated when it comes to, you know, something like street photography specifically. But not everyone is a street photographer, of course, and you need a camera to do specific things. Like I do, in this case, needing my camera to also be a really good video camera, but also not try to be a video camera. It's a very niche camera, I think. So those are pretty much all of my first impressions of the X-T5. I'm going to be bringing this camera with me next month to Morocco, so I'm going to be using this camera a lot more for photography and for video. If I missed anything or didn't bring up a certain topic or specific thing about this camera that you're interested in getting my opinion on, please leave a comment and I'll try my best to get to your question. Again, in the next few days, I'll be releasing a video on how I've set this camera up for street photography, so be on the lookout for that video when it comes out. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, learned something. If you did, please leave a like, helps out a lot, and subscribe for more videos if you're interested. Alright guys, I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.